everyone, and I'm sure we'll have latecomers always, to this instance of Zero Events, which is a many months-long series of social VR platform explorations. It started by a number of people. One of the original starters is here with us, Andre. Started, I guess, before COVID, and then kind of picked up steam during COVID to explore how to create events, live events, but to do it virtually. And then from that motivation has just snowballed into exploring now what people have learned to do and what they are actually doing in these types of platforms. Tonight is also a Karma event, which is a Karma Lab is the lab that I coordinate in Istanbul. So we have a couple people here who are from Istanbul, and we're happy to have them here with us as well. So our speakers tonight are all actors, acclaimed, working on acclaimed projects, and we're really excited to have them. We have Deirdre and Steve, we have Jonathan, and we have Michael. Can't see everybody's picture now. Oh, Michael, yeah, your picture was off for a second. So you would know them if you're, I think all of you know their works. If you're watching this later, you may not have seen all of their, or some of their works, but we were talking about Para, we were talking about, Michael, what was the name of the Christmas Carol project? Chained?
Chained, yeah.
Yeah. And Finding Pandora X, and of course the Underpresents the Tempest, and others, I'm sure. But we're going to be hearing about some of these experiences working on these projects, and then where this is going, because this is an exciting field for all of us, both as consumers, and then for those of us who are on the design and the technical side. You know, these are projects we might ultimately start to work on if we find opportunity to do so. So on that note, I would like to ask kind of just one by one our speakers to introduce themselves, kind of touch on what was the first time you saw VR? And did that immediately come to your mind as, wow, I'd love to perform, I'd love to act in that space? And so to start it off, let's start off with Deirdre and Steve. Would you please introduce yourselves to our community?
Hi there, I'm Deirdre of Lyons. I've been acting in VR since 2019. I think I first saw VR when I was put into a headset for, I did a couple of 180 films, one for The Willows and one for both, and one called Freaking Weekend, both for the Amaze app. And I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy and amazing and magical. But I didn't quite put the connections together about what it could be or do, possibly. I just thought it was amazing. And then in 2019, I was cast in The Underpresents. And then I was able to do The Underpresents Tempest, as well as Finding Pandora X. And then Steve and I started wandering into the producing of live theater in VR, and we did Para for the Halloween season, are currently working on Krampusnacht as well. So this is Steve, my husband.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve. What she said. My first experience in VR, I think, was we had a friend of ours' son was graduating from college, and we went to his graduation, but we went to go see what projects he was working on. And there was another class that was working on some VR things. And that was the first time I put a headset on. It was sort of this rudimentary kind of wire-framed desert motif, which was pretty interesting. But the first time I saw anything, a full-fledged production outside of the 180 stuff that Deirdre was working on, was I saw a performance of Chained. I think James Cowan was in for Michael Bates at that point, but that was the first full-on immersive sort of VR experience that I had been in. I was lucky enough to be cast in The Underpresents, but sadly, I was also hired at Warner Brothers, and my schedule did not work out, so I couldn't do it. But later on, you know, she got me.
What can I say?
So
I dragged him in.
We're back to producing. So that was it for me.
Awesome. And now let's go to Jonathan.
Hey, everybody. First, Michael, thanks so much for having me as part of this conversation. It's really excited to get to chat with and meet a lot of different VR and XR makers and performers. And for me, my first experience in a headset was doing research for a theater piece I was directing that was going to be created with a group of teenagers and asking the question, what's more real, your online life or your offline life? And that was back in 2018. So I got to do this really great deep dive into a lot of what was going on, in particular around virtual reality. And the first experience I got to see was Carnegie Arena, which is this really wonderful location-based experience that puts you in the bare feet of an immigrant who is trying to get across the southern desert from Mexico into the United States, and kind of what that experience would be like, and what it would be like to be stopped by the Border Patrol. And it's a really, it was such a powerful and affecting experience. And it kind of blew my mind, especially with an experience like that, that's weaving in so many different kinds of haptics. They had wind effects and the ground beneath your feet, and you were barefoot for this location-based experience, was actual desert from, actual dirt from the desert. And so it was a really, a unique experience. I never had anything quite like that in terms of what that did empathetically to me. And I got to start performing in VR about a year later with Double I Studios and their production of Love Seat that was at the Venice International Film Festival last year in 2019. Yeah, I've just kind of been, like many people, I think, once I got that first taste of VR as an audience member and then as a creator and performer, I've just kind of been like, yes, great, more please. And been spending a lot of time continuing to work with Double I Studios, developing and then performing in Finding Pandora X with Deirdre.
Awesome. And Michael, you kind of touched on these same topics, but I ask you maybe if you again just kind of recap for some of our new joiners, and I may start the video just kind of where we officially started. So you performed in Chained. And was that the first time you performed? Were you performing in videos like 180 or 360 before that?
Not really. More like experimental things, if you will, or it's just like tossed off kind of thing. Nothing in a sort of professional produced capacity. And yeah, that was my first experience performing in VR, and largely as an extension of the work that I've done in immersive theater, which is also how I've gotten to know Deirdre and Steve. And you know, there's a lot of overlap between immersive performing and VR performing, and some of the skills and sort of I guess thinking about immersive tends to translate to similar 360-degree environments in VR as well. But Chained, and then the Underpresents, and then Underpresents Tempest as well.
Okay, so now I'll start with a handful of questions, and then we'll have some Q&A later on. But just to kind of seed the conversation with the questions we had kind of prepared before, so they're not going to be big surprises. Are there a lot of opportunities to perform in VR? And I'll expand this to immersive theater, because immersive theater, I don't think is perhaps as widely distributed around the world as perhaps VR headsets are. So are there a lot of opportunities to perform, or is there a lot of the resources needed to produce these types of productions? So that's open to the group. I don't know who wants to take a stab at it first.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I'll go. So I started also in immersive theater, and I do think that immersive theater in Los Angeles is very popular. Whereas it's, even though it's niche, it's very loved, and there's a huge following. I do think that VR in general is very translatable to immersive theater as a platform, and it just sort of does the work for you by placing you into this sort of magical world, and then having live actors in there. There's a real good and simplistic fit for that. Just people don't really quite know how to do it, and it's not as hard as it seems. I mean, when I was doing the Underpresents, I thought you had to build this whole platform with the game, and to get it on Oculus or on the Vive port or all these. There's like and as a theater maker, there's really no translation for that. But it is, much easier than I thought when I did Finding Pandora X. It sort of taught me how you can actually change out your set designer for somebody who knows Unreal or Unity, change out your costume designer for somebody who knows how to create avatars, and then you can put up something in VR. But it really is finding its audience currently. So as far as opportunities to act in VR, there are not a lot right now, but there are a lot happening and continuing to come our way as people discover that, it is possible. Once they got the idea of how they can, once they can picture how they can do it, it's going to explode in my opinion, especially with the Oculus 2 coming out and everybody getting that for Christmas and then experimenting with that and seeing what other people are doing and getting inspired by that. So I do think it's a platform that's going to grow rapidly as we move forward, specifically with dealing with the pandemic and how that keeps everybody at home. And then going on, I do think that there'll still be, it'll just be another avenue of storytelling alongside immersive theater and concerts and other events. And that's just what I see in the world.
Yeah, we're all kind of on the tip of the spear here with this. There's not a whole ton of people doing it at this point, and we're sort of limited to those of us that have access to headsets and the technology right now. And then also, I believe that I would bet that out of probably all of us participating in this, I would be willing to bet billions of dollars of Jeff Bezos's money that I am the newest to the whole world of VR. And I found that when we explain it to people that don't know what's going on, they have no idea what it's all about. And then you put the headset on them and they go, oh, wow. So that's sort of what finding our audience now is kind of an interesting thing too, is who's coming to the shows and who's able to participate. But I think pressing on as well deeper into the future, when the creative folks like us, the more that we can meet and communicate and work with the technical folks, the folks that write the code, that build the worlds, I think that there will be more opportunities for us. The opportunities are there if we create them, it seems like at this point. But so we're headed there.
Yeah, Jonathan and Michael, anything to add? I wonder, for example, does it pay the bills, or is this kind of like a passion thing? Do you really just take on this for the love of it, or is it something that kind of can compete as an option with other maybe traditional acting work if it's available now?
Yeah, so that is definitely project to project. And I think like Chained had essentially studio backing, and that was part of the, that made that project resemble a sort of traditional kind of like output from a studio or something like that in terms of its financing and its pay and all of that kind of stuff. But I think what's interesting about that is that there is, of course, I think like a degree of reticence without a sort of guaranteed audience to fully invest in terms from I would say studios, et cetera, like things that are basically like not Facebook or Valve or something like that, where people are really making a push to produce content and create VR as an entertainment space. For immersive, a lot of what had been driving larger scale events was cooperations between studios and companies, and taking the form of like activations and sort of like things that were combining both entertainment and also providing kind of a marketing purpose. And those were the sort of, if you will, those were opportunities for actors to get paid, I think, on a scale that's a little better than, basically like independent and more bootstrappy kind of productions, which I make myself. So that is definitely, that exists alongside that as well. There was a comment about which platform I think a lot of this is taking place. I mean, to my knowledge, I think like definitely the most accessible platform is VRChat in terms of just being able to throw on a headset and go and start to play with assets in terms of just being able to experiment. I mean, Altspace as well, I think has opportunities. I'm curious about Facebook Horizons. I'm a little warily curious about Facebook Horizons, but I'm curious if how that's going to what shape that's going to take and what opportunities that'll provide.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that piece about social platforms, and I think that they, for performers and for creators generally, they provide a really great incubator to try out a lot of things and to create content. They also, especially spaces like VRChat that allow for audience to experience the piece just through desktop if they don't have a VR headset, that really helps to start to bridge that audience gap. Because at the moment anyway, there are relatively few people who have headsets, but there are of course a greater number of people who have desktops and who have mobile devices that they can engage with this content on social VR platforms. And I think there's a real opportunity to create content that can appeal to both audiences, ones that are in headset and out of headset. I know a lot of the conversations I'm having with different creators right now are around that space and kind of figuring out how you build that VR native audience by reaching out to where they are now, which is, really on desktop. And one of the, sort of silver linings of 2020 might be the fact that the audience that's there on a desktop and of course in a headset is much larger than it probably would have been if everybody wasn't starved for the location-based live performance events that we all typically love. So that's really exciting. And as far as where the revenue comes from that, I just echo that it's really similar to a lot of other mediums where if it's something that's supported by a resourced institution like a studio, then the money is there and the infrastructure's there for performers to get paid a decent wage, a living wage. And a lot of times, especially in the experimental section, there's not a lot of money, but there can be a lot of ownership and empowerment for the performers to be creating either their own work or to be working with creators that are really wanting you as a performer to be more than just somebody who kind of shows up and is just a performer, but is actually somebody who's helping to create the experience, and you have ownership over it that way, and that's also exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, we've touched on a number of these points now. One, does it change your relationship? I mean, do you feel more empowered because there's the ability to create worlds in a way that perhaps is maybe more accessible, or at least, just different, maybe cheaper than building sets or building out sets and stuff like this? Do you feel like the ability to work with virtual worlds empowers you more? And kind of somewhat relatedly to Jonathan, what you were talking about, the accessibility on different viewable platforms, desktop and mobile devices, are these virtual environments, are they more benefiting the actor or the audience? I mean, which do you think that, for example, you're given more abilities? Is it more fun or more empowering? Because we had, I'll say that we had Joe Hunting. Joe Hunting is a filmmaker who makes films in VR, but he makes traditional films out of that, and which was quite a, innovative, because not so many people are talking about that. But I oftentimes wonder, to be in the virtual environment is so great. Maybe it's the actors really who they're the real beneficiaries from this. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts about that. Again, open to whoever jumps on it first. It's a landmine or a grenade, you can avoid it, but.
Joe is here as well in our chat. He just wrote. He's actually with us. Joe Hunting is with us.
Oh, Joe.
Sweet.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Joe.
Joe, hey, Joe.
Okay, yeah. I saw VR Joe, but I didn't.
Hey,
connect
Joe.
it. Yeah.
I mean, certainly we could just have a conversation and just you know, go back and forth a little bit between the four of us, and if Joe wants to jump in, certainly welcome to have him. I think there is a little bit more accessibility in being able to create something in VR currently, because the price of building a set, finding a location, particularly in Los Angeles, getting the permits, which are absolutely insane, can be pretty expensive, and there is a little bit more accessibility for people to play and create and do things in VR, in my opinion, once they sort of understand the tools.
I've discovered that there's sort of a trade-off too. I learned pretty quickly on way back in my early acting careers too, that if I learn stagecraft with regard to theater, that helps me inform my my performances, how stagecraft and lighting will support a performance. Likewise, in the world of motion picture producing, you know, the more that we learn about cameras, focal lengths, editing, and how it supports our performances, can give us a lot of information that will allow us to perform in such a way that those people can do their jobs and make our performances even better and more compelling and connect with people. In the VR world, it's, yeah, I think Deirdre's right. It's just, there's so many possibilities with our imaginations are what's limiting to us. The trade-off I've discovered is that because we're not in the physical world, we lose that ability for subtle communication that connects with an audience. So we have these beautiful worlds that help support our performances, but yet, like in filmmaking, some of the most powerful scenes are this close up on somebody's face without them saying anything. It can be so powerful, but in the world of VR, when we're performing, we don't get that. Silence equals dead airspace. It's harder to convey an emotion with just looking at somebody or another character. So, but it is an interesting trade-off, and it allows for a lot of imagination.
Michael, may I? Steve, absolutely agree. I'm coming from the film world, and I'm at the moment transferring more and more and researching all the virtual production world, virtual performance world. I'm experimenting a lot with Kinect and with this new volumetric recording, and I have met lately on the VR days David Gochfield, who's as well with us from the NYU, and we had a conversation about the future of theater and what is VR for doing this, and we had the conversation about the 7-38-55 rule. That's it's a minimal part of the communication to the other human being is the voice, and then it's a lot mimic, and then it's a lot body language. And when I was doing Pandora X, afterwards I immediately approached the actors and I'm like, how is it to be in the avatar and not having the chance to use your biggest tool set, your body language? And it was because I'm testing with this volumetric recording, how to work on that, how to make it. And when you say there's normally a close-up, of course, in my mind as a filmmaker, it's like, yeah, why they're not having once the avatar and then an element of the avatar next to it overscaled and placed at the same time in the virtual world as an additional thing, because in general, everything is possible in there. So, yeah.
Yeah, Martin, it's really funny. You bring that part of it up. I think in some respects, the tool sets are just sort of different. I think that as we're all kind of talking about, there are things that you gain in a VR performance space, and then there are things that you miss from other mediums. I think that's actually wonderful and delightful. It's why I don't think theater's going away or VR is going to get replaced once the pandemic's over. I think we're going to continue to find new ways of telling stories in all of these different mediums, and I think in a really good way, they'll all infect each other and change the way that we do things and use tools and tell stories. in terms of expression and body language, there's a lot that I think about and draw from puppeteering and my background as a puppeteer, because you don't have the same kinds of facial expression and physical proximity to people, but you have all these other tools. So you have scale that you can play with in VR in really unique ways, and you can play with changing from one look of a specific character to an entirely different character instantaneously. And so storytelling opportunities are really ripe with that kind of tool sets. And we're still sort of figuring out how best to use them and how to use them differently and to do things that we couldn't do before in either live performance or in film.
Maybe I can drop in a question there because that point you just touched on, storytelling. How do you guys see that? Because obviously film is a linear medium and theater is also to some degree a linear medium. Music is more or less linear, and VR is not anymore like that. And if you're getting interactive and you are together with maybe other people that are avatars as well, how does that change storytelling? How does it change it for you personally, kind of knowing both worlds?
Well, so I want to touch on the previous question and then and answer that as well. But I think so there was a traditional Broadway producer who came to see like an early test run of Chained, and his whole thing was just like, how do you decide to do anything at all in this medium? Like, because you're essentially starting with a blank canvas. Like, where do you even begin to decide to tell stories without having constraints placed on you to guide you in one direction or another? And I think in terms of producing for scale, the stuff that you can make in VR, if you would be wildly prohibitive for all but the most moneyed of places to produce IRL, right? And that I think is the big difference. But at the same time, the professional productions that I've been a part of have also had budgets that are far greater than any of the professional immersive theater productions that I've done. So there's a tension between that. It is really, because the palette is wider, there's more interest in what that palette can produce, as opposed to, the budget is this and we don't have the money for this location, or we're going to use a found space instead of constructing a set, and so on and so on. So in regard to storytelling, I think that it's true. I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with creating experience as opposed to delivering narrative. So in immersive, there are sort of two different immersive theater. There are a couple of different approaches. There's more than that, but for the most part, there is giving the audience a sandbox experience. For those of you that are more familiar with Sleep No More, you are given a space in which you can go and explore and essentially create your own experience through the agency that you are provided. And I think a lot of VR, certainly the Underpresents, matches that kind of experience, right? You are put out into this space, literally sand, this desert, and you can go different places and decide essentially what you want to spend your time doing, interacting with other players, the environment, performers, etc. There's also the more loosely tracked narrative experience, the time boat thing that you can go and experience as well. I would say that there's also an immersive that is more what's called like a dark ride. If you think of different theme parks where you strap in, you go on the thing, you are in the car that goes through the story, you're experiencing a 360 environment, but you're also getting a crafted story. And I think that there are multiple opportunities for that in terms of storytelling in VR. The Tempest is something that's a little bit more on that dark ride experience. It's a 40, 45 minute, sometimes 50-minute experience that you then you're getting a more contained story. It's not the same every time. And you have a lot of say as an audience member, a lot of impact over that story and how that unfolds. But essentially, you're getting the same kind of experience. Whereas there's also opportunities to provide that non-linear you create your own kind of experience within VR as well. Like, I mean, I think a lot of the answers to this are like, yes, and also no. That I think that's one of the most exciting things right now about making things and participating in the space.
Can I jump in for a second on that? If you guys are okay. I think that, Tim, I think the tension that you're identifying is the tension between audience agency and authorial control, right? The author wants to be able to control the narrative completely, and in VR, because we feel fully present in the environment, we have this feeling that we want to be able to participate somehow in the story. But I think that what we know from theater is that the audience can feel present in the environment, but does not need to fully participate, or the agency could be restricted to something as simple as choosing a different point of view, a different place to watch from. But I think that the real key in terms of how theater storytelling applies to VR is that VR is a medium of space. It creates the sense of the space around you. And theater is also a medium of space. We tell stories in the space that is, you know, the stage or the theater or the site where we're doing the performance. And so a lot of what we know about staging things, about telling stories in space is directly applicable to telling stories in VR.
Could I follow up on that, actually? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Deirdre.
Certainly, when I came to see your piece, you know, you placed chairs around, and so that gives, you know, you walked into what looked like a theater, so that gave the audience the cue that they were supposed to sit down as in a theater space, because they have that schema in their head of that's what they're supposed to do. And if you plop them down in the middle of the Under, or the middle of the Tempest, or middle of Finding Pandora X, and they're in a world, then it's up to us as the actors to sort of create those boundaries for them, if there are any boundaries. So I think it's it's just a different way of storytelling and different stories.
So to follow up on some of that, in the Tempest, you know, the audience is constrained. You know, they cannot speak. They can act, but they cannot verbalize or vocalize rather. And I felt like, wow, you know, I'm not someone who had ever really participated in participatory theater, but how nice it must be to work with people where you know, there are some constraints on to what, you know, you like, maybe there's fewer variables for the actor to have to manage during the course of that. And so I wonder, what do you guys think about these being able to control or bound the interaction and participation with the audience? What does that open up for you? What are you more comfortable to do with the audience? Maybe because you know that there's less that they can do, so you're more comfortable working with them.
I think, to go back to David's point about authorial intent, is there's more confidence that you're going to be able to deliver a story or a narrative, I think, especially without text, or without the audience being able to interact with you or converse with you. But that being said, I mean, there are plenty of ways to that don't involve being able to speak, that are that add information, are potentially disruptive, or just distract, or any of those things, any of those other things. I mean, I think that that's all very much on the table. I mean, I think a lot of different experiences that I've had, there are sort of 3 points that they sort of go more towards or less towards. There's audience agency, audience interaction, and then I would say voyeurism in general, the ability to view. And I think that, I mean, Chained is very interesting in that way, because when I was physically in the space as the spirits touching you, the ability for the audience to push back on that reality was really limited. They would participate via prompts but there was very, very rare. I mean, I think I did over 400 performances of that. Very rare was the audience member who wanted to completely disrupt the experience totally. I was watching some Let's Plays of the at-home version, and it is a completely different experience for the audience, because there's not that physical thing in the room with them to reinforce the reality of the piece, if you will. And so you can be much more dismissive. Like it's like watching a horror movie at home. You know, you can say, okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a break. Okay, I'm cool. I'm just going to sort of do something else during this tense part. And you have the ability to distance. And I think that taking away things definitely opens new avenues, which I think is part of the intention for Underpresents in Tempest, is giving the players different opportunities to express themselves, while also having some safeguards against, you know, more sort of, you know, offensive behavior. But it's not as, people can still be kind of unpredictable in a great way, even without being able to speak.
On that, is there, oh, sorry, Jonathan, go ahead if you had something to add on that.
Sure. I think just to add on to that, I think so much about it in VR performance as in immersive theater in particular is about the onboarding process and about how you set up an audience's expectations and understanding for what their role is in the piece that you're playing. And what is exciting for me right now about performing in VR is that the audience members that are coming to it don't have the same set of expectations that a typical theater goer has. So typical theater goers have done the same process so many times of, you know, I have my tickets, I go to the theater, I get my program, I sit in the seat, the lights go down. And so it can be very hard sometimes to try to change that onboarding experience, change the sort of formal vocabulary that you're working with. And because VR, like immersive theater, is usually in unconventional spaces. And of course, in VR, there are virtual unconventional spaces. People are coming in with less notions about how it's supposed to go or what they're supposed to do. And I think that in a really wonderful way that opens possibilities up, and also means that having specific limitations or expectations and teaching your audience sometimes about who they are and also what they can and can't do is really important. And I think it's just something that often gets overlooked in more traditional forms, but that can make for really compelling experiences for audiences that I think sticks with them in a different way after it's over, because not only was the story a new story, but the way that they encountered that story and their part in it is different than something they may have ever experienced before.
Do we have any other, we have a question about, actually, yeah, so Andre had asked a question about whether you anticipate kind of a new breed of actors coming up. And, you know, maybe in a long-term sense, the answer is kind of an obvious yes, but in the more short-term sense, I wonder, you know, in VRChat and some other platforms, you have active role players who've been doing this for a while. Like, do you ever see these people come into acting spaces? Do you see a role for them in that sense? You know, if they're maybe not traditionally trained actors, but they are traditionally trained VR performers. So I wonder, what do you see from that type of community? Do you interact much with that? I mean, do you ever, those of you who maybe perform in VRChat and stuff, do you ever just kind of chat about that experience and kind of compare notes? And or I wonder sometimes, you know, obviously people can perform in public spaces. In VRChat and some social VR platforms, there are public spaces. And I'm curious to know if anyone ever tries to have a structured, organized performance in a public space in VRChat.
I can speak to that, Michael, if I may. Sorry, my microphone wasn't working. I didn't mean to ghost everyone when you were saying hello. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Nice to be here. It's so interesting hearing about the Underpresents. I really love the Underpresents. So and it's just so great to see some of your actors in here. It's awesome. There's actually something that started up this weekend again, which is very similar to that point, called Callous Row. Callous Row is a big cyberpunk roleplay community, and they've built this huge cyberpunk world in VRChat. And there's a group of around 50 people that all go into the world at the same time. And then they all role play as individual characters. So there's store clerks, there's people who work in the subway station, there's like a bounty hunter kind of group, and it's a world, living, breathing world that people go and just be in, and they perform, and there are kind of stories that evolve naturally, and people have agency to do what they wish to do in this world, and then everyone adapts to that. And if someone's being disruptive, you know, that'll be a conversation, but I think it's a very well looked after community. And so I think that in that sense, there are performers coming in and doing community projects and, you know, learning to do things, and maybe a lot of them haven't got professional experience doing it. And I've seen a few of their streams. I've never been there personally, though it's something I'd really like to do. But I think just that question you asked is very much happening, and it's very true. It's just not something that's you know, very public yet, and there's no ticketing system, and you know, it's not an event that you can easily get into. It's very much kind of a closed community. You have to kind of know what you're doing in order to get there. It's not a welcoming thing yet. Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that story in. You know, it's very much happening.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, you're out there in VRChat so much, and you know all of the stuff that's happening. I would say Para started out very much as a bit of a community project as well, and we had some of the AIs in there, and the secretary was played by Rebecca, and you know, some have more or less acting experience, but they all knew VR. And so, you know, being able to mix in some professional actors with some actors who are more community based, and then just some directing usually is all it takes to sort of allow for there to be a nice community built in there that allows, you know, people who are less experienced. But I feel sort of like in real life, it's the same thing. There's certainly LARPer communities and there's theater communities, and sometimes people will go and bridge back and forth, and sometimes they stay a little more separate depending on the individual. So yeah, I think that there's certainly opportunities for people to engage in this medium if they're interested in it and create their own experiences. But some just really want to stay in that LARPer or that world building, world sandbox that they have, and not have the obligation of learning lines or being somewhere on time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it is more LARPing, isn't it? I forgot that was a term. That's definitely true.
And then somebody asked a question too about audiences and getting audience involved in stories. As I was talking to David about, you know, if he put out chairs and made a theater, and so you kind of knew that it was a theater experience, so you did what you did in real life for that. But the other stuff that I have personally been involved has really involved people being involved in the story. And I think maybe it's either because of that this started more adoption in the gaming community, or it could be because of social media and everybody wants to be a part of the action. But most of the stuff that I've been involved has really included the audience in the story and made the audience a part of the story, if not the main character in the story at times.
Maybe I can throw something in this moment. I have been on 2 physical Venice VR islands, 17 and 18. And I was in Umami and in Draw Me Closer. And Draw Me Closer was started as a white empty room. And then the operator who leads me in, I get the glasses, I get off the shoes, and he tells me, there will be a bed drawn and you actually can sit down on the bed. And I was like, huh? Okay. I can sit down. I sit down on the bed, and actually in the bed, then in the moment I'm sitting down, a body of my mom from the story is drawn, and actually there is lying an actor, and I had a physical body contact with the actor's leg, and I was like, what's that? And the story goes on, and I have a session with the mom painting on the carpet on the ground. Later, mom brings me to bed, and before that she hugs me. And I was like, wow. And then she was drawn as a drawn character. I watched into a comic kind of face, but there was a physical actor, motion capture suit, tracked, matched into the story. And I had physical interaction with the actor. And that was amazing. And that was amazing that I was somehow passive, but I somehow not as a visitor of the experience. And in umami, they let you go as a visitor of umami. That let you go to your last supper before you get hanged in a prison. And there's a prison officer who's constantly trying, please confess that you have been it. And as I'm from the directing and cinematography field, I jumped into the role of the actor, and I was like, it wasn't me. And I was heavily interacting with this guy who was supposed to lead me through the experience, and who was an actor. And it was super fun to perform as a guest together with the performer. So maybe I'm this kind of person who loves to be involved and part of it. But the physical experience, or what Michael meant before with the smell or with the heat of the scent and so on. This was in another experience called Separate Silences. They put you in beds, 2 people from Denmark, they put you in beds, and they pretend you are in an awake coma. And then you witness that the death is coming up in your hospital room, and the death is, you are in glasses, and they blow out candles and put the steam of the dead candles into your nose, and you feel the death approaching you. And the smell and the heat, it's so more intense. So I highly love that part of performer meets audience. I know it's a single audience kind of type of work, but I was like blown away by the potential of this. So have you experimented with the physical interaction, like acting somehow mocap in VR, touching with the audience?
Yeah, that was change. That was Michael's change.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, right? So that would happen with the you put the headset on. The wet room that you were just in is 1-to-1 in the VR world, and then through this black hole, a hand comes out, a digital hand that you see. You reach out to the digital hand, but there's a real hand there, and that's my hand. And then you get pulled into the experience, and then it begins. Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean that's the thing that with all the work that's been done in the past, 9 months in terms of making things in these virtual distance way in VR, I'm very excited to see what happens in the future in terms of integrating physical performance and VR. I mean, I think especially, I mean, this is sort of like, this always feels like tech optimism to a degree, but in a few more years, especially with opportunities that may happen in terms of just like wireless data transfers between different, basically 5G stuff that's able to make things more wireless within the same room. That's also very exciting. Part of the just physical challenges with Chain was it was using a tethered Oculus Rift with like, I don't know, a 90-foot cable or something like that. And so part of the thing is just how do you make this experience as fluid for the audience member as possible? And the opportunities that come with just incremental advancements in technology will make those experiences all the more just magical for the audience member, like you're talking about. And I think that, engaging senses that up till now can really only be engaged via, in person, while also augmenting that through digital means is very, very exciting. And I also think that that's something that that's like a conversion moment for a lot of people, for VR skeptics or people who don't have much experience with this as a medium, to expand what they believe and what they realize can be done with this.
Yeah, I'm going to just jump on that because you're touching on something that I've seen is really exciting, which is the possibility for VR to place audience members in a different kind of active role and an experience than they normally would, even with immersive theater. There is a sense of inhibition that goes away a little bit when you have the headset on. You forget that the rest of the world that sort of cues you into taking less space is there. And it is, in a sense, like traditional mask work. For anybody who's put on a mask as a performer before, when you have it on, there's sort of a freedom that comes from the symbolic and physical masking and taking on a different face to the world. and it allows you a kind of expressive freedom. And I've seen this happen with people when they get put into a VR experience where they're having a first-person embodied experience as a character or a participant in the world. And I'm really excited as a creator for when we can go back to location-based experiences that have people in headset that are finding ways for them to engage with their other senses, with touch, with smell. Because I know for myself that those have been some of the most powerful experiences, and they're really so simple. It's just, like a virtual character goes to hand me a cookie, like in Cosmo Within, which was a piece I saw last year at Venice VR, and you reach out and, oh, there's an actual cookie. All I did was grab a piece of food, but there's something so insanely wonderful for my brain about taking this very familiar thing and putting it into an unfamiliar context. And it allows me, I think, a sense of experience and freedom and willingness to play act that I think isn't normally there. And I'm really excited to see where this field will push in those realms. And I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, I think, and to that end, it's very much like, it's magic, like stagecraft magic, in the sense that it's misdirection, and VR is the most potent misdirection available, it feels like. And that is very exciting. And yes, to echo that point, I definitely notice in the underpresents that there are audience members who are much more willing to play, like the social sort of inhibitions that you may have in seeing an immersive theater piece in person. There's less of that when you are in an avatar presenting space. And that is also exciting for me to have that that willingness for people to participate and play.
So I'd like to ask, so I think Michael and Jonathan, you both touched on kind of what you see from the future in maybe the long term or the somewhat more near term. I'd like to throw that same kind of question, what the future looks like for performance in VR, either locally or in these platforms, these geographically dispersed platforms, to Deirdre and Steve.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, we now have a global audience, which is, exciting, that potentially that is. I just saw a really beautiful piece called Scarecrow, which was done at the Raindance Film Festival. Unfortunately, it was a tethered headset piece, so you had to have the really expensive equipment to see it. But it was a non-speaking show, so neither you nor the performer spoke, and there was this beautiful story that unfolded before you, and it was universal, and there was no language barrier. It couldn't go as far as somebody has the equipment to see. So I think that the future is what we make it. Certainly this medium is sort of like film in the early days, and the computers in the 70s are like, this is really cool, what do we do with it? So it's a bit like, well, let's discover it. And we are currently doing that, discovering what can be done with it, where our imaginations take us to, being inspired by others and what they're doing. And because it is so new, and because it is so very tip of the spear, people are, it feels more collaborative at the moment than competitive. And there's a lot of support, and people who are working in the industry are easy to access. You can just email them through various social platforms, and they will probably respond and answer questions if you have some. I've found. So it's a very exciting time to be involved, and a very exciting time to be a creator.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
So as we're kind of wrapping up a bit, could I ask what projects you guys are looking forward to? Is there anything that you're working on right now that maybe hasn't come out that we might be able to see, or things that are kind of like dream projects?
Yeah, we have Krampusnacht coming up for the holiday season, so we'll be doing that. It's still also a bit of a proof of concept, the way Para was, just sort of Para was sort of like, and this is sort of like, yeah, so kind of building on what we learned before. And then hopefully maybe in the new year, looking to putting something together to actually submit to festivals and things like that.
Will Krampus be a location-based?
No, it will be all in VR, and it'll be hosted in VRChat. Yeah, it'll be all virtual.
Michael, may I say something to the future as well? I recently found a new function, as we all are slave to the tools and to the options the tools are giving us. I was talking with a company from LA, HoloStream. No, Suite. And they have HoloEdit and they have HoloStream. And the HoloEdit program gives the opportunity for the creator to, in high marks, easy rig a body scan with an avatar rig that you can play. And in my mind, it was immediately like, okay, so a musician by now is using a loop box to use one performer and loops several voices. So I was like, okay, give an avatar or several avatars who are programmed when they are not embodied to be in a loop, or give them a standard function, and then give one actor all these avatars and let him improvise an entire play, and he jumps from character to character.
So that's like mind show.
There's so much what is like, it's all based on what the program or what the programmers and what the tools are giving us for the future to interact with.
That does sound like Mind Show, which if no one has got a chance to see it, it's actually been taken off of Steam now. But Mind Show was kind of that. You would create a scene, you'd populate it with avatars, and one by one, you'd go into that avatar, act, it would record you, you'd jump into the next avatar, and then be able to act against yourself. Which I thought was, yeah, just a tremendous app. Maybe just came too early. You know, I don't think that many people took advantage of it. And the films you made were rather short. I think in the early versions, they just a few seconds, but I mean, really just a great concept. Very much as you were describing, Martin, just not dynamic, but if you added a live component to it, yeah, I guess a one-person show would be possible in that sense, maybe.
Nick just dropped the SDK in the chat. It is given away for free or something. I don't know if it's about that, but he wrote something like this.
Yeah, no problem. I have the suit over here, and they're really nice people. So if you want to try out the suit, I can bring it over, and you can give it a try. So I'm not a performer, but I would love to see more people performing. And here's the SDK, and go ahead. I don't want to have it getting dusty. So I think it's nice to have more dance performers, physio, theater performers using such a haptic suit, because now it's getting more affordable, and they really want to have some nice use cases. They have, like, you can stand in like in a Michael Jackson figure, and then you can dance like him. Like, it's so amazing what they are setting up right now, like a Bob Marley figure they have now, and so you're dancing. You're dancing like Bob Marley. I don't know if that's IP correct, but it's all possible with such a haptic suit. So I would love to see more people using it.
Nick, what you're describing, actually, I want to ask maybe, to the actor. So imagine you had a suit, because you could do motion capture already, but imagine you had a suit that would augment your experience. Would that be very attractive, or is that really kind of not necessary from an acting process, like the feeling temperatures and things like that? I mean, what as augmented performance? Yeah.
For me, that is super exciting. I mean, again, not to go back to as often, but especially right with Chained, it was like, oh my costume design is amazing. My makeup costume design is amazing. I am these characters when I appear to you in headset. And I was working with another performer who doubled as the sort of stage manager, calling different cues, right? And we would sort of work behind the scenes as it was happening to indicate that. But that was the sort of thought that I had when doing that, was like, oh my God, if I had the ability to efficiently, easily, and it's not too cumbersome, call some of those cues myself, like, the ability to influence that performance, that seems really exciting. And then you expand that out. What if I play 8 characters? What if I play 12? What if I have voice modulation? That's available to me. I think that is just awesome. And I mean, that lines up a lot with like what I like to do as an actor, to sort of obscure, you know, me and, you know, authentically play a bunch of different characters. And yeah, I think that's just super exciting.
All right. Well, then I think. Oh, sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'll just go on to just sort of go back to your question to wrap up with, and also to kind of say one thing about the future. I think the couple of projects that I'm looking at developing in VR over the probably the next year or so are in part also looking at the opportunities for taking live performance and also creating something that people can, audiences can take in if they can't be at a specific place at a specific time, whether that's a virtual space or physical space. And I think that this is, there's a big opportunity both for accessibility for audiences to be able to engage with more content, and also as a way, especially for performers who are coming from a live performance background, one of the things that's most challenging and keeps your ability to usually have much of a an ability to get revenue is the fact that only a small amount of audience at a specific amount of time can take in your performance. And VR allows for this real mixture of having, let's say, like a premium live performance event that is happening in real time that people can come in and take in at one price point, and then also be able to have that same content and for it to live in a really satisfying way online for a much broader audience to take in, where you can lower those paywalls. But I think that's, from producerial end, is a really important thing and a really hopeful thing for looking at how live performance can be a real viable career for performers and other makers. So the two pieces that I'm kind of looking at, just to point at them really quickly, one is going to be an idea that we're sort of sparking around with Finding Pandora X. So if you're not familiar with that piece, the premise takes place in Mount Olympus with the gods Zeus and Hera trying to find Pandora and to bring hope back to Mount Olympus. And there's this beautiful set that the design team has created in VRChat. And we're like, we've got to be able to use this set. It is literally sitting here. And what other content can we put in there? And so we're starting to hatch up an idea around Zeus having a variety show. And what would that be? What would a really satisfying, live sort of show that would have live performance elements, but then could have pre-recorded segments that are part of that? And what could we do with that? How could we put that out not just to an audience that's taking it in right when it's being captured and filmed, but also something that could live really satisfyingly online? And then the other piece that I'm developing with my production company, Smoke and Mirrors Collaborative, is going to be a piece that's kind of looking at the local history of Washington, D.C., and co-creating that with local residents and artists in order to make it an experience that draws in new voices and people who haven't been in the VR space, and to see what can kind of come out of using VR to spark conversations that go beyond the experience itself.
Awesome, great. Then I really want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, but most especially, of course, our speakers. It was our pleasure to have you here, and I hope I hope the conversations were not the same ones you always have. I hope there were a couple points and questions that came up maybe innovatively. So on behalf of Zero Event and for the Karma Lab here in Istanbul, I want to thank each of you and say we're very looking forward to trying to see your works that are coming up, if possible. And so Finding Pandora X, is that still something that people can see? Is that still active? I just leave that there.
Yeah, not right at the moment. So we're hoping that we'll have more performances in the new year. So as we have those dates, then we'll be able to put those out. I think like any show that's, you know, has an initial successful run, then you go, okay, great. Where are the interests and where's the audience and resources going to come for it to be remounted? But we're all excited to do that. So we'll keep you posted.
Okay, yeah, I asked because there's been a few people in Turkey who've asked me. We didn't get a chance to see it from here, but that's good to know. All right. So again, thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure to have you, and I wish you all a very good day or good evening, depending on where you are.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
This is great.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Yeah, this is really good. Thanks.
Bye-bye.